Can Zhen Huan, blessed with both beauty and talent, truly outshine all in the imperial harem and enjoy everlasting favor? Quietly returning to the feast, the atmosphere was one of peace and happiness, everyone deep in a dreamlike intoxication. Everyone was absorbed in their own enjoyment, and Huan Bai quietly expressed her worries to me. "Miss, where did you go without letting your servant follow? What if something had happened?" I replied, "I am fine. I just went out for a walk." Huan Bai said, "It's good that Miss is fine." After Ling Rong finished singing a clear song, Xian Ling asked me, "What took you so long to go out?" "I couldn't hold my liquor and went out for some fresh air." I smiled. I saw a flower called evening primrose, and was captivated by it for a moment. He was puzzled. "Evening primrose? What kind of flower is that?" Then he smiled at me and said, "The crepe myrtles in the courtyard are blooming beautifully, and I have ordered some to be moved to your Yifu pavilion." Ah, it is indeed the season for crepe myrtles to flourish. I bowed in thanks. Crepe myrtle with its purple-red graceful blossoms shining brightly. Yet at this moment, it was the modest evening primrose that mirrored my mood. Chao Jieyu said with a smile, "The emperor is very kind to Jieyu." I smiled indifferently. The emperor is impartial to all in the 6 palaces, and is also very kind to sister. Chao Jieyu glanced at Xian Ling, her eyes brimming with affection. The emperor showers his grace evenly, from the empress down to his concubines, all are blessed. Chao Jieyu raised her cup to Xian Ling, drank first to boost the mood, and won a round of applause from the audience. She took a handkerchief to lightly wipe the corners of her lips, when suddenly a palace maid approached her in a flustered manner, whispering a few words in her ear. Chao Jieyu's expression changed, and she hurriedly excused herself to leave. Xian Ling stopped her to ask, "What's so alarming?" She forced a smile. A servant came to report that when he spat up milk again. Xian Ling's expression showed a hint of urgency. "Has the imperial physician seen him?" "Yes," Chao Jieyu answered. The physician said it's a weak constitution when he had since being in the womb, aggravated by the humid and hot weather. As she spoke, tears appeared in the corners of her eyes. It was getting better. I don't know why it's happening again today. Upon hearing this, Xian Ling stood up and went out. Chao Jieyu, along with the Empress and Hua Fei, hurriedly followed him. The rest of the guests soon dispersed. Ling Rong came out and returned to the palace with me. She lowered her head and pondered for a moment before saying, "Sister, don't you find something strange? Tell me what you think. Spitting up is common in infants, but why does it keep happening to Princess Wenyi? If it's due to the heat, the Yinyuzhai where Princess Wenyi and Chao Jieyu live is near water." I inwardly agreed and said, "Princess Wenyi is already over a year old, and I seem to have never heard of her having symptoms of spitting up before. It indeed came on suddenly." However, Ling Rong said with a slight smile, "Perhaps it's just a common symptom in infants, and taking good care will lead to improvement." I said indifferently, "I hope Chao Jieyu and Hua Fei take good care of the princess." Ling Rong looked down, her face showing sorrow. For one's own glory and favor, it's too cruel for a mother to act this way. I couldn't help but feel pity for the adorable little Wenyi, wondering what kind of suffering she was enduring at the moment, and shook my head softly. "Let's not talk about this anymore." My heart was filled with a complex and indescribable fear and sadness. I heard from the old palace folks that in the previous dynasty, concubine Jing of Emperor Huaiyang often secretly pinched the infants in their swaddling clothes to make them cry and attract the emperor's attention, and was eventually demoted and imprisoned in the cold palace after being discovered. A mother is supposed to be the gentlest and kindest woman in the world, but in this deep palace, she too has been deeply twisted, becoming a viper who, for the sake of glory and favor, would not hesitate to use her children as tools. If one's own children are treated this way, it's no wonder that throughout history, there have been many who, in the struggle for the throne, regard the children of others as enemies, and the path to the emperor's throne through bloodshed is truly terrifying. I unconsciously stroked my flat belly, gradually regretting that I had taken cold medicine to avoid favor. Now, still showing no signs of pregnancy, it's probably going to be very difficult to conceive. However, if I were to have a child, I would inevitably have to engage in a vicious struggle with others. Thinking of what was in my heart, I really couldn't smile, and forced a change of topic to Ling Rong. "I'm afraid many people will have trouble sleeping tonight." Ling Rong's sweet smile remained, Hard to say, it might not be just tonight. Indeed, after Xianling spent a night at Chao Jieyu's place, he stayed with Hua Fei for 2 consecutive days, and even Princess Wen Yi was taken care of in Hua Fei's palace. Everyone in the palace praised Hua Fei for becoming virtuous after reflection. The empress pretended not to know about it, and while playing chess with me and holding a pine nut, she said indifferently, "Hua Fei is becoming smarter, knowing how to borrow others' hands." I made a move and smiled lightly. The empress can see through Hua Fei's tricks, showing that her skills are no match for yours, empress, and that's not much cleverness. The empress slightly closed her eyes in pleasure, revealing a satisfied smile. The pine nut in her arms meowed softly, its green eyes suddenly brightened, and it deftly jumped down, pouncing on a fluffy ball by the flower pot. It fiercely captured the fluffy ball under its paws and tore it apart, then tossed it aside. Then it showed a gentle and elegant smile again. I suppressed the disgust and fear in my heart towards the pine nut and turned my head away from it. The empress paused her hand and quietly watched the process, then smiled and said, "Even this creature knows how to pounce on the ball." However, Princess Wen Yi's condition of spitting up milk did not improve. The next morning, I followed the empress and others to visit Princess Wen Yi. The usually splendid and magnificent Shende Hall seemed to be enveloped in gloom. Chao Jieyu had swollen red eyes, and both Hua Fei and Xianling looked worried, with the imperial physician standing by, looking apprehensive. Princess Wen Yi seemed to have just woken up, her eyes barely open, and she appeared lethargic. The nanny held her gently and soothed her for a while, and Chao Jieyu brought out a flower drum to entertain her. Hua Fei, standing by, suggested eagerly, "The horsehoof jelly we had a few days ago seemed to be enjoyed by the princess. Why don't we have some made again for everyone to try?" Xianling replied, "That sounds good, I'm a bit hungry too." Soon the horsehoof jelly was served. It's a very simple dessert made with water chestnut flour, icing sugar, and boiling water cooked until it becomes white and semi-transparent, then mixed with the flesh of honeydew, peaches and watermelon, which is quite appetizing. Princess Wen Yi, being so young, had her bowl without any fruits. Chao Jieyu, with the help of the nanny, carefully fed her spoon by spoon, occasionally wiping the drool from her mouth with a handkerchief. Seeing her enjoy the sweet jelly, a gentle smile appeared on her tired face. Ling Rong and I exchanged glances, silently thinking that such a gentle and careful mother would not harm her own child for the sake of favoritism. Perhaps Ling Rong and I were overthinking. Seeing this, the empress smiled and said, "Seeing the princess enjoying her food, it seems she will recover quickly." Chao Jieyu showed a grateful expression and said, "Thank you for the empress's concern." After just a few bites, the wet nurse came forward and said, "It's time to feed the princess milk." Saying this, she took Princess Wen Yi and started to feed her. Such a small child, just after being fed milk, it wasn't long before the milky white liquid spilled from her mouth, and soon it gushed from her nose like a small white rainbow. Even the horsehoof jelly she had just eaten was vomited out. Princess Wen Yi's small and soft body could hardly bear it. Almost as if suffocating, she trembled and cried non-stop, her little face turning purple with distress. Chao Jieyu couldn't hold back any longer and burst into tears, snatching the child from the wet nurse's arms, holding her upright, and gently patting her back with her face pressed against Princess Wen Yi's little face. Hua Fei also shed tears, extending her hand to hold Wen Yi. Chao Jieyu hesitated for a moment and did not immediately let go, clearly reluctant to part with her. Only then did Hua Fei reluctantly withdraw her hand. The scene was chaotic for a moment. Hearing his daughter's cries, Xianling became furious and stepped forward to confront the imperial physician. "What is going on here? It's been 3 days of treatment with no improvement. The situation has even worsened." The imperial physician, terrified by the emperor's anger, hurriedly knelt down and kowtowed. "Your humble servant really does not know. Generally, infants spit up milk mostly in the first 1 or 2 months after birth, due to a narrow pylorus. But now the princess is already over a year old," he said, wiping the sweat from his forehead with his sleeve. Xianling shouted, "Useless trash. Can't even cure a baby's spitting up." The empress hurried to soothe. "Your Majesty, please don't be angry. It's not good for your health to get upset. Let the physician examine her carefully." The physician kept kowtowing in agreement. After thinking for a moment, he said, "After much consideration, I fear it may be due to the princess's poor gastrointestinal health, possibly from consuming something that harmed her stomach. I would like to check all the food the princess has eaten from the day her spitting up worsened to today. Xianling replied without hesitation. Do it. The baby's food was laid out one by one on the long rosewood table. The physician examined each item, finding nothing unusual, his expression growing more and more grim. If there was nothing wrong with the food, it would mean his medical skills were lacking, and the consequences would likely extend beyond just losing his job at the Imperial Medical Bureau. People stood behind the Empress, inevitably whispering among themselves. It was not until the physician picked up the horse-hoof jelly that Wen Yi had eaten earlier and looked at it carefully for a long while that a hint of joy appeared on his tense face. He immediately knelt down and said, "Your humble servant suspects there might be something wrong with this jelly. To be cautious, I request that your majesty summon the eunuch in charge of tasting food in the imperial kitchen to help identify the issue." Hearing this, Xianling's expression darkened, and he commanded sternly, "Send for Zhang Yilu from the imperial kitchen."
Follow us to avoid getting lost and enjoy endless exciting stories. For more content, please go to the Story Wall homepage to view more exciting novels.